Wherever you could be, I would like to thank you so much for being part of the biggest TV in Arua City. Of course, it's a Tuesday morning live here. Of course, this is where we give you the best in terms of sports. Of course, we shall be discussing with you a number of sporting stories developing as far as the day is concerned. But the biggest one is World Cup is picking up actually intense issues. Of course, a number of stars are making headlines in the World Cup. So far, Kylian Mbappe is making headlines, Lionel Messi is making headlines, Haaland is equally making headlines in the World Cup. So far, we shall be discussing all this with you here on the TV here. And then there's a big one at West Ham United. Of course, there actually Netherlands forward Crucial Somerville is set to leave the Hammers in a few moments. Of course, after the World Cup, don't expect this guy in the names of Crucial Somerville to be with the Hammers in their games in the Champions. Of course, a number of teams have been tracking his services. Manchester United, Paris Saint-Germain, they were the teams in tracking his services. So it still remains to be seen where this guy will be going in. Of course, Lionel Messi finally is making a huge improvement in the World Cup so far. He has now scored 18 goals in the World Cup so far. He has surpassed German striker in the names of Miroslav Klose's actual record. Of course, Klose was the all-time goal scorer in the World Cup so far, but this guy in the names of Lionel Messi has surpassed his record. Lionel Messi has 18 already in that perspective. So let's begin from home and we talk local sports before we go into some of those international stories. Of course, in the world of local sports, there's a huge one for Pakwati youngsters as they are monitoring the services of Fen Jonathan, the Ondupraka midfielder. Of course, Fen Jonathan has been one of the huge talking point in the recent days, of just because Team Pakwasi youngsters have already sealed their way through into the big league next season. And Samson Sizokuti, who previously worked with Fen Jonathan at Lea Football Club before, is a huge admirer of the boy, and he said that he wanted to see that the boy also plays with that team of Pakwasi youngsters in there. Of course, Jonathan has been one of the regular players who has been playing games consistent for that team of the Football Club, and I think this could be one of the opportunities. And he is one of the biggest product of Samson Sizokuti. Of course, he worked with Samson Sizokuti at San Leo Football Club before joining Ondupraka, and at Ondupraka he equally worked with Samson Sizokuti. Now Samson Sizokuti wants to take him to Pakwati youngsters, a new debutant in the big league come next season, and it still remains to be seen whether Fen Jonathan will be making headlines in that perspective. Of course, a number of teams are already tracking players at the Football Club. At the brand has been one of them being monitored by AC Villa. Now Pakwati youngsters is already monitoring the services of Fen Jonathan, which I think can be a possibility. Of course, Fen Jonathan and Samson Sizokuti has a huge relationship, and I think that power can be in position to lure him to Omar Sedema, and I'm quite sure that team of Pakwati youngsters with the project that they're having right now, Fen Jonathan suits the project that Pakwati youngsters is having. Pakwati youngsters is trying to go with players who are very, very young for them, and this guy in the names of Fen Jonathan is still very young, and I think under Samson Sizokuti, someone who nurtured him, he will never want to disobey him by joining Pakwati youngsters. So Pakwati youngsters are monitoring the services of Fen Jonathan, the skipper of the back end. Of course, he is good when it comes to giving those long balls. He's good in set pieces, and he is one of the good players. I think if Samson Sizokuti can be important to take him into that team of Pakwati youngsters, he can be of a great addition into that team. Of course, his actual contribution alone is hugely massive. That's Fen Jonathan for you. But I think if he goes into that team of Pakwati youngsters, that could be one of the upgrades for him. It's never late than never. Of course, it's high time that he also needed to move around in the world of sports to see that he also feels another atmosphere. Of course, he has been a player who has been playing games from the Praga for a long period of time now, but I think changing environment could be one of the biggest things for Fen Jonathan. But I think with Samson Sizokuti and the relation that he had with Samson Sizokuti at Lea Football Club, then at the Praga Football Club could be one of the factors which I think can lure him into that team of Pakwati. Of course, a number of his teammates at Lea Football Club are in that team of Bakwati youngsters, but I think there could be a possibility for him to leave that team over on the Of course, Ontopraka said if any offer comes for some of these players, they are ready to cash them out. The players are free to go, and still remains to be seen whether Fen Jonathan will be important to join his actual former coach in the names of Samson Sidokote at that team of Bakwati youngsters. So Bakwati youngsters will be playing in the big league come next season. Of course, we shall be having a number of teams playing in the big league. Bakwati youngsters Calvary, then on to not forgetting team like the Black Angels. These are the team that will be playing in the West Nile region in the big league. Around 4 teams in West Nile sub-region that will be playing in the big league come next season. So we shall be grateful ourselves to see what will be happening in that perspective. But Fen Jonathan, I think, could be one of the biggest assets for the team of Bakwati youngsters, because Bakwati has invested a lot in the youngsters, and I think these youngsters, if men that do very well, they can be important to do something very, very good for this team of Bakwati youngsters. Of course, right now in the Canada generation, it's the youngsters who are performing in the game of sports. So I think Fen Jonathan could be one of the biggest additions into that team of Bakwati youngsters. When it comes to set pieces, he was good. His work rate is excellent, and he's one guy who has got the experience in the big league now. But I think adding that into the new grads at the team Bakwati youngsters could be one of the biggest factors for Fen Jonathan and team Bakwati youngsters in general. So I think this could be one of the good moves for him. But I think Samson Sidokote will be important to lure him from Ontopraka and be important to play for Bakwati youngsters in that perspective. So let's leave that now. Talk about the games that were played in the World Cup. Of course, in the World Cup yesterday, we did see France running riot against Iraq, beating them by 3-0. And then Argentina were 2-0 winners over Austria. And then Norway were 3-2 winners over Senegal. Then we did see Algeria recording their first win in the World Cup, so far beating Jordan by 2-1. Of course, Senegal, in 2 games, Senegal has never picked actually a win. Of course, in their opening game against France, they were beaten by 3-1. Then again by this team in the names of Norway, they were beaten by 3-2. Of course, Haaland was yesterday the hero for this team of Norway. Of course, he scored twice in the World Cup. Not forgetting about the performance that Lionel Messi also put forth in the 2-0 win over Austria. I can tell you, Lionel Messi in the World Cup so far, he is making a lot of headlines in the World Cup. But I think these are some of the things which I think, if the world is watching serious, I can tell you, Lionel Messi is a player of his own. Lionel Messi is not forcing things. Lionel Messi, his magic salon is actually trying to help him to do things in the World Cup. He has now scored a number of goals in the World Cup. Of course, he is not currently the world's top scorer in the World Cup history. Of course, Lionel Messi has now 18 goals so far in the World Cup. No one has surpassed his record. Of course, it was only German legend. We call him Kolovs. Of course, he comes from Germany. He is the player who has scored a number of goals in the World Cup. He had 16, but Lionel Messi has already surpassed his record, and Lionel Messi has scored 18 goals so far in the World Cup. Of course, Lionel Messi's actual first goal in the World Cup came in 2006, whereby he scored his actual 2 important goals in the World Cup against Serbia and Montenegro, respectively. So Lionel Messi currently he is now the all-time goal scorer in the World Cup history, and he scored his first World Cup goal when he was only 18 years. That was way back in 2006. So Lionel Messi is leaving to the building, and already in the International Cup, of course, he has already scored around 122 goals for his team. I'm talking about Argentina, and Cristiano Ronaldo has a speed advantage in the continental engagement. Of course, Cristiano Ronaldo has scored around 143 goals for Portugal already. So Lionel Messi is still a number of goals shy of Cristiano Ronaldo when it comes to goals for the national team, and Lionel Messi has scored only 122 goals so far in the ongoing international engagement. So those are the goals that he has scored for his national country. I'm talking about Argentina, and it still remains to be seen whether he can be important to score more goals and probably surpass the record of Cristiano Ronaldo, which I think could be one of the hardest things for Lionel Messi in that. Of course, he's having 122. Then this guy in the name of Cristiano Ronaldo is already having around 143 goals so far for Portugal in that perspective. Of course, in the World Cup right now, there's a huge race in the Golden Boot. Actually, of course, who will be winning the World Cup Golden Boot? That is the biggest thing happening now in the World Cup so far. Of course, already in the World Cup, in 2 games so far, we have seen Lionel Messi firing around 5 goals so far in the World Cup. And then we did see the likes of Kylian Mbappe and Haaland scoring 4 goals respectively in 2 of the games so far in the World Cup. That is something very, very huge. Of course, Lionel Messi is not actually leaving himself behind, and the young stars in the names of Kylian Mbappe and Haaland, they are also scoring goals for fun in the World Cup so far. So, whom are you backing up to win the Golden Boot in the World Cup? Is it Kylian Mbappe? Is it Haaland? Whom are you backing? Then, whom are you actually looking at being the all-time goal scorer in the World Cup history? Lionel Messi is already at the closing edges of his year. He's already 39 years already. And Kylian Mbappe of this world, the Haaland of this world, they are still very younger. But I think in the next coming actually World Cup, they can be important to surpass his record if Lionel Messi doesn't score more goals. Of course, Kylian Mbappe already has 15 goals in the World Cup so far. That clearly says that Kylian Mbappe has a huge chance of actually surpassing that record that Lionel Messi will be setting in the World Cup. But I think this is going to be one of the biggest things in that specific. Of course, when you look at the goal that people, these guys are scoring in the World Cup so far, I can tell you the last time that we did see this kind of goal scored in the World Cup was way back in 1954. That was the time when people scored a number of goals in the World Cup. Since then, there has been no one who has been scoring that kind of goal. So it is the 2026 season that the people are scoring a number of goals. Messi is scoring goals for fun. Kylian Mbappe is scoring goals for fun. Not forgetting Haaland, they are firing goals in all the cylinders. So 2026, then 1954 was the year when goals were scored for fun in the World Cup. So this is going to be one of the biggest things to talk about in that perspective. Of course, in the world of transfers, it's a huge one for Arsenal fans, as Aston Villa and England midfielder Morgan Rogers is keen to a move to Premier League champions Arsenal, and he's saying that he is ready to join Arsenal in case the deal comes in. Of course, there has been a report yesterday that Arsenal has been using Declan Rice as a tool to convince this guy to come into that team of Arsenal. But I think Morgan Rogers is saying that he is ready to join Mikel Arteta's boys, such that he also comes and probably leave as a champion. Of course, Arsenal are a team that is determined. Arsenal are a team that is kind of fighting for trophies, and he's saying that he wanted to join this team of Arsenal in case the deal comes. And of course, he is in good terms with Declan Rice and currently as they talk, they are in the World Cup so far in the World Cup, and they are doing extremely very, very well. Before I tell you more about the transfers, because in the world of the games that will be coming in the World Cup so far, we shall be seeing Portugal that will be playing against Uzbekistan. This game will be at 8 p.m. Then England will be playing against this team in the names of Ghana at 11 p.m. Then in the morning hour, we shall be seeing Panama that will be entertaining Croatia. This game will be at 2 a.m. Then Colombia will be playing our neighbor DRC Congo. This game will be at 5 a.m. in the morning. So in the world of transfer, as I was telling you, this guy in the names of Morgan Rogers is keen on a move to Arsenal, and Arsenal are saying that they are ready to sign him in case Aston Villa is ready to agree that the money that they will be offering for the services of the 23-year-old England's international. Of course, like I said, like I told you earlier, he is in good terms with Declan Rice, and Declan Rice is using his powers to convince him to come and play for Mikel Arteta's boys at the Emirates Stadium. Of course, Manchester United's central forward Marcus Rashford, to the 8, is prepared to take actually a pay cut to join Tottenham Hotspur for a fee of around £40 million after his actual loan deal with Barcelona Football Club expired. Of course, Dizabe is actually looking to reinforce his board, and he's saying that he wanted to add Marcus Rashford into the into his team, and he wanted to add a number of players. Of course, he's already saying that he wanted to add this player in the names of Sandro Tonali from Newcastle United, and he's saying that he wants to pay a fee of around £85 million for the services of Sandro Tonali. I can tell you, this team of Tottenham Hotspur, don't underrate this team. If they can be important to sign Sandro Tonali, if they can be important to sign Marcus Rashford from Manchester United, I can tell you this is going to be a different Tottenham Hotspur team. Yes, they survived relegation last season in the Premier League, but whether they are talking in the transfer market right now, they already talked about signing Marcus Rashford. They already talked about signing Tonali. They already talked about signing this player in the 9-7 from Manchester City. They already talked about signing Samaville from West Ham United. this team of Tottenham Hotspur, in case they go into the transfer market and sign a number of these senior players into their books, Tottenham Hotspur is going to be a different team to talk about in the Premier League next season. So it still remains to be seen whether they can be important to sign Bob Tonali and Marcus Rashford. And Chelsea, also 26-year-old English defender Trevor Chalobah is in the radar of Como, and Como are saying that they wanted the services of Trevor Chalobah. Of course, Trevor Chalobah, whenever he goes into that team of Como, he'll be playing in the Champions League. Of course, Chelsea will never be playing in the Champions League. They will never be playing in the Europa League. They will never be playing in the UEFA Conference League. And Como and Cesc Fabregas, they are saying that they wanted the services of Trevor Chalobah, who has been called into the national team of England lately. In there, of course, it still remains to be seen whether he can be important to quit that team of Chelsea. Of course, Chalobah is one of the fast rising youngsters in the transfer market so far, but I think in that team of Chelsea Football Club, he has been one of the highly rated defenders. In my own last season for Chelsea Football Club, he was one of the most performing defenders at that team of Chelsea Football Club last season. But I think leaving Chelsea for Como could be one of the biggest things for him. Of course, Como will be playing in the Champions League for the first time in the club's history. And Cesc Fabregas, one of the legends at Chelsea Football Club before, he could be one of the star players in that team of Como. So it still remains to be seen whether Como can be in position to lure the services of Trevor Chalobah from Chelsea Football Club. Or could Bayern Munich and Tottenham Hotspur above Kiena on the 29-year-old Juventus defender Bremer, but the Brazilian is happy to stay at Turin, and he is already in the market list of Bayern Munich and Tottenham Hotspur respectively. Barcelona have made actually approach to see that they can be important to sign Harry Kane, and they say that if Harry Kane 32 is willing to join them, they are ready to sign him, and it still remains to be seen whether Harry Kane can be in position to leave that team of Bayern Munich and join the Spanish champions. I'm talking about Barcelona. Of course, Barcelona is much used to signing all is actually the strike of DDC Lewandowski also joining in. Then they also wanted the services of Harry Kane. These are some of the youngsters, all the strikers that Barcelona are targeting. So it still remains to be seen whether they can be important to sign this guy in the names of Harry Kane from Bayern Munich. Of course, Manchester United are prepared to accept actually a loss on the 25-year-old Uruguay midfielder Manuel Ugarte in order to sell him this summer. And they say that if any club is interested in the services of Manuel Ugarte, they are ready to sell the player, and it still remains to be seen whether Manuel Ugarte can be important to accept that offer of leaving the mountain. Of course, he still has got 1 year left on his current contract at Old Trafford. So Manuel Ugarte is said to be leaving Manchester United. According to Manchester United, are saying that they are willing to sell him at a very, very minimal cost in there. Of course, Leeds United have moved closer to finalizing a deal for Southampton's actual Northern Ireland midfielder Sararights to the two, who is only a year left of his contract, and he is saying that he is going to be leaving. That, of course, Leeds United, it seems they are going to be signing this guy in the names of Charles Shear from Southampton. In the Brighton are closing in on the 27-year-old Venezia and also defender Michael in there. This according to Sky Sports. These are some of the stories developing as far as the day is concerned. Of course, West Ham United and French defender Jean Todibo 26 is close into agreeing a loan move to Fenerbahce after the Hammers relegation. Of course, the number of players will be leaving this team of West Ham United in the championship. One of them is Todibo, one of the good defenders that have watched in the Premier League last season, and there is already a huge offer for him down in Turkey, and Fenerbahce are saying that they wanted to sign him on loan. And players like Samaville already been tracked by Manchester United and the team Paris Saint-Germain respective. The likes of Martins Fernandes been tracked by Real Madrid, Manchester United, Manchester City. A number of senior players will be leaving that team of West Ham United. So it still remains to be seen what will be happening in the Hammers camp. These are some of the stories that are making headlines in that perspective. So my time is up. I need to leave the studio for the next program to come in, because after here I'll be going for some other responsibilities of the studio. Bye bye for now.